Yeah, so financial reporting for the annual financial statements we'll do later, but these slides will be shared with you, so don't worry about making furious notes or anything like that. We'll send this after. Trying to, I don't know why my, oh, there we go. Okay, so basically the intention of the webinar is really to equip the treasurer to fulfill their duties. It's going to highlight the importance of the financial procedures and controls, and going to help clubs with financial management, planning, and budgeting. So as Sean mentioned, we're well aware, and I've attended the same treasurer webinars hosted by Camogie Association and GAA and Ulster. So the content is really sourced directly from there, and then where needed, I've adapted it for Canada. So just wanted to touch on the GAA governance guide. It's an excellent guide, and I'm not sure if everyone has seen it before. We have it available on the Canada GAA website, so I've put the link here down at the bottom. And I really encourage everyone, treasurer and all of your committee, to read this. So if you haven't seen it before, it is an excellent guide. Really, governance is a system of rules and practices and processes by which all of the association and all units are directed and controlled. And it really sets out the standards to be achieved. And it's broken down into sort of 5 main principal areas. So first is leadership. So just saying that officers must embody the principles of good leadership. And so that's whether you're the chairperson, the treasurer, in any role you're in, we all have a commitment to good leadership. The second one is particularly important for the treasurer role, which is exercising control. So the committee must ensure that appropriate internal financial and management controls are in place. And we're going to cover, the bulk of what we cover today is focused on that exercising control section. Third principle is being transparent and accountable. And so officers and members have to be transparent in all of our activities, and we are accountable for our actions. And so some of the things that we're going to go through are really because, as treasurers, we've got, we're holding, the important assets of the unit under our responsibility. So just knowing that what we do, we are accountable for. And so let's make sure, we are protecting ourselves in sort of how we do this. Fourth principle is around operating effectively. So volunteers, we need to ensure that everyone understands their roles and that the committee is and the club is operating effectively and efficiently. And the last one is behaving with integrity. So in everything that you do, be honest and fair and independent. So it's a really good guide. I really encourage everyone to download it and share it, and even discuss it at your next committee meeting if you haven't seen it. Okay, so responsibility of the treasurer. Treasurer is a key officer within the executive committee, and you need to be involved in all financial decisions and activities. And essentially, it was on the GAA webinar that they kind of broke it down this way, and it really resonated with me, and I wanted to share it with you, which is the treasurer has a responsibility to protect your club, or if you're a divisional treasurer, or myself as the county treasurer. So I have a duty and responsibility to protect the county, as well as protect the association. So when we're thinking of the higher bodies, our governing bodies, we have a duty to protect the association. And third, we have a duty to protect ourselves, right? So we are the person handling the bank account and, having monies coming in and out. And so in every case, you want to be able to protect yourself, that you're not ever sort of questioned about what you're doing because it didn't follow procedures, or, you have to be prepared to answer questions. So just a good way to sort of think about it in terms of sort of everything that you're doing. Okay, so the role of the treasurer. Some of you are new to the role, some of you have been in the role a long time. So basically your duties are around, receiving and paying out money, caring for that, depositing the monies into the accounts, collecting any fees that are due, membership fees or sponsorship fees or anything like that. You need to be a signatory on the bank account and ensure that any activity on the bank account is reported. You want to reconcile bank balances and financial transactions on a regular basis, and create a financial policy and ensure that financial procedures are adhered to. And so we'll go through later in the slides is what should be in a financial policy and sort of the way to create one and ensure that it is followed. Another duty is preparing monthly reports and annual financial statements. And you really want to be watching, sort of the bank balances, and if funds are dwindling or there's some concerns, is ensuring that the executive is made aware. So just a few more things in terms of sort of record of, keeping a record of all transactions. So making sure payments, make the payments, obtain receipts for money paid, give out receipts. So if you are, if you need to, then use like pre-numbered or electronic receipts. You'll have a bank deposit book. Record all the details of the income in the accounting system. So your accounting system might be just an Excel spreadsheet, and that's okay. Or there's other ones like QuickBooks or Wave apps that you could use. You want to be hanging on to the bank statements, the check stubs, and retain. So now often, like I know for the county, I'll do mobile deposits on any checks that we receive. So I just keep the actual checks in a folder somewhere, so we always have those to refer to if needed. Okay, are there any questions on that part of it so far? Okay, so those were sort of the basics, and your job description is available on any of the Club MAIF documents or on the GAA website and on the CGA website, but it's a good summary for anybody, sort of new coming into the role. Okay, so this next section is all around sort of financial management. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on sort of financial management, good governance. So individuals should not engage in financial transactions alone. All subcommittees are accountable to the club executive. So if you do have any subcommittees, so you might have youth, you might have fundraising, development, any others. So they are accountable to the executive committee for reporting, but also any financial transactions as well. You want to put good controls in for purchasing and set purchasing limits, so sort of approval levels for purchasing, and ensure that approved and documented financial policies and procedures are in place. And any key decisions are documented, so within meeting minutes, as an example. And if anything changes in your financial policies, make sure that those financial policy documents are updated on a regular basis. And so this is actually a section taken straight from the governance guide, and I just thought it was a really good one in terms of sort of high level. This is what a proper financial management system should encompass. So generally, it's regular and comprehensive management and financial reporting, and we'll go through sort of how often that should be happening. It should encompass effective budgetary controls and then reporting variances periodically. So if something's changing, that you're making the executive aware that, gee, we're spending too much in this area, or we've got unspent budget in this area. So what are we going to do about that? Clearly understood and observed decision-making procedures. This is really important, and that'll get outlined in your financial management policy. And clear and documented procedures and policies. Another key, key thing is segregation of duties among officers. So we need to ensure that the separation of those responsibilities of duties, which if combined would enable one person to record and process a complete transaction. So it's just making sure that along the way that no person is doing, end to end. Is there? Oh, there's somebody else. Just Kim, did you let somebody in there? Was there another person?
Yeah, I added someone, and I'll just watch and let them in as people show up.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Yeah, and so just that segregation of duties is really important. It's really essential for proper financial controls. And sort of leading on from that is just ensuring that all officers understand their roles and responsibilities and that of their fellow officers. And that becomes really important. So, that's why we started with, well, here's the duties of the treasurer. And so you're aware of your duties, and, be aware too of what the chairperson, what their duties are, what the secretary is, what other members, so you could make sure that you're doing what you should be doing and nobody else is doing what you should be doing. So that's really important. So it's really important for officers to sort of understand their roles and stay within their lanes. So, you're responsible for certain things when it comes to finances, and make sure that you retain that responsibility. Obviously, following all the protocols and procedures that are going to be set out and agreed upon, but you always want to retain control of your responsibilities and not let everybody go, oh well, no, I'll do that for you. It's like, well, no, this is how we do it. This is my responsibility. Okay, so I've broken down sort of the different financial controls in a couple of different sections. And so these are recommended best practices for banking procedures. So the next couple of slides are just sort of key things to, you may already be doing a lot of this, but there may be a couple of things that you thought, oh, geez, I never thought about that. I'll make sure that we start doing this within our club. So all payments must be approved by the treasurer and at least one other member of the core executive committee. So that's that's fairly standard, and I just have to make sure that you're always sticking to that. And sometimes you think, oh, okay, well, we'll just do this quickly or whatever. But again, if you go back to sort of those key principles of protecting the club, protecting yourself, you want to make sure that you're getting approval before any check or any bank transfer is ever sent out. So all checks must be co-signed. So there should be 3 signatories on the account, and every check would need to have a minimum of 2 being required on every check. Some clubs, maybe they want to keep it, 3 signatories, 3 signatures. That's fine too. Just make sure you have a minimum of 2 signatures on each check. And one of those signatures should be the treasurer whenever possible. I mean, mostly you're within the same city, so you can either meet up or whatever if you need to sign a check. It gets a little more tricky if you're in a division or a county, and we end up mailing checks around sometimes for second signatures, but it's just kind of what you have to do in order to kind of keep the financial controls. Another point that you may or may not have thought of or have in a policy already is that connected persons on a committee living in the same household should not be co-signatories. So oftentimes, sometimes we're small clubs in a small city and you have, 2 people in the same family on the committee, and that's great and fine. Just make sure that, you never have like a husband and wife as co-signatories on an account, or father, son, or, sisters or whatever. So, and that should just be added into your financial policy and stated as that. I mean, and part of the, good thing about having the policy is it's something then it's in writing, and it just is how it is, right? No one can kind of refute it because it's something that's agreed to by the executive committee. Another financial control is do not sign blank checks. So sometimes, again, if we're dealing with geography a bit, you kind of would say, okay, well, I'll sign 3 checks, one signatory signs and then exchanges them with the other signatory, and then that's kind of for convenience sake. So in terms of best practices, really try to avoid that. If you do require, if you only have checks to pay and you don't do e-transfers, which is the case on some accounts, including the county account, then, make the check out, sign it, and mail it off to the other signatory, and then that signatory can mail it on for payment. It does take a little bit longer, but it really is proper financial procedure. And again, it protects you, protects the club. Any questions on that? Okay. A few more in terms of sort of banking procedures that is advised. So if you're sending an electronic payment, and some clubs, most of the clubs are doing this where their account is set up to be able to send electronic payments. Some aren't, including the county, as I mentioned. So if you are sending electronic payments, it's really essential that they have to be co-authorized in writing by at least 2 of the account signatories. And so this could take the form of, okay, send an email to say, okay, I've got this invoice, with the backup documentation on it, and I'm looking for approval to make this payment out to this supplier or this person. So just make sure you have in writing approval to send that email transfer, that you as a treasurer aren't just going in there and sending it off, or another signatory who would have access to your online bank account is not sending it off without having approval. Another really good thing that we recommend is to include a detailed description in the message section of the email transfer. So I just included an example. I kind of just made it up, but basically it's, in the message section, you want to have it as detailed as possible. So I said here, this is to purchase equipment from O'Neill's on invoice number 224. Again, I just made it up. Email being initiated by Carrie Mortimer, so I put my full name, and I have approval by Sean Hart and Angelo Murray. So this becomes important, especially if you ever want to or need to look back on email transfers. So in the accounts, you can go to email transfer history, and you can see. So if anybody had to go back and look and say, oh, well, what was this $200 paid for? You should be able to see in the message section the exact details. And again, because there's often more than one person who has access to an online bank account, this then, if you make this a standard requirement that, who actually initiated that email transfer, you'll be able to always trace back and say, okay, well, who approved it? And again, it should be right there. So just something to kind of add to that process. Okay, so for receiving electronic payments, and a lot of us do in our clubs and counties, when you're sending them out, or asking somebody like say a sponsor or something to send you an electronic payment, ask them to send it to a dedicated treasurer email address. So in some cases, some clubs and the divisions do have an @gaa.ie email address. But in some cases, the club doesn't. So what I'd recommend, if the club doesn't currently have a treasurer email address on the GAA.ie, is create a dedicated treasurer email address. So something like treasurer at, add your club name, so PI Celts as an example, at gmail.com. And so what's important about this is that account then gets passed on to anybody in the future who is the treasurer, and it becomes that corporate memory, right? And it's not sort of in the email of somebody's personal email, past transactions, past financial statements, past approvals, all of that. So it just becomes an account that you can pass on. Now, just for everyone's information, we really do think it's very important for the treasurer to have a dedicated email address. So right now, clubs have a minimum of 2, which is chairperson and secretary. We're going to be putting in a request to have a treasurer email on the @ga.ie platform for all clubs going forward. So we'll let you know once we hope that gets approved. But in the meantime, if you don't have a dedicated one, then just create one for now. Any questions on the banking procedures with this so far? Okay, a couple more. This is the last few points about banking procedures. Ensure that the mandates are up to date, so including like removing former officers and adding new officers as bank signatories. So once, as soon as after your AGM, like as close after the election of your new officers as you can, try and get those bank signatories changed. And I know it can be a bit tricky because you all have to be available at the same time often, or if you live in different cities, like for the county, I have to go into the TD account here in Ottawa, Sean has to go in Toronto, and it takes a week to get the papers over. It is a bit of a hassle, and we understand that, but it really is critical to the financial procedures. And the other thing to remember to do too is when you do get new officers is change the online passwords. And so you might have 2 or 3 people within the club that have the login credentials for the bank account. And if those people have left their roles and or the committee, then each year, and sooner if somebody leaves partway through the year, make sure to change the online password for the account. And just, keep the checkbook secure, goes without saying. Another thing to keep in mind, and something that we suggest, is for bank statements. Again, when you go back to protect the association, protect yourself, is just when bank statements come in, so either you get a paper copy or you get notified that an electronic copy is available, is make sure that the bank statement is sent to the chairperson and secretary, as well as one committee member who's not an account signatory, sorry. Right, so it just means that on the executive, because it's easy to kind of, say come to an executive meeting and say, oh yeah, finances are fine, and yeah, it all looks good. We can verbally report that, but really, it's the bank statement that says whether or not, what has come in and what has gone out and what your actual, cash financial position is. And so it's really important that as the treasurer, you're not the only person seeing this statement. You want to be sending that out every month to the various people on your committee and bringing it to your committee meeting, so you can actually just hold it up and show it and say, okay, we've got $3,500 in the bank, just so everybody sees it. So if you get them by paper copy, either scan it or take a photo and then email it out, or if you get electronic copies, obviously you can download it, or if it's only I see I have a typo there, downland, okay. Or take a screen capture of it. So you can download like a CSV file from your account, but it's also really important that you take a screen capture so you can actually see a visual of the account, because when you download, it's an Excel file, so it can be changed. So it is important for people to see an actual screen capture, and you can just email that out after. So that's everything on banking procedures. Is there anyone that has any questions, or are there any other controls that you do within your club that aren't covered here that would be good for others to know about?
I think, Kerry, it's worth a mention about the forms that are available. I don't know if they're on our website, but forms for resignation as a bank signatory and forms of authorization to authorize new people to be the bank signatories.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know that we have them available. Basically, these are just letters. They're kind of just form letters. It just makes it easier. It's just a quick letter saying, okay, this person resigned, da da da. You might already have them in your club. We have them, so we can share those after and make them available. Basically, you can just change out the CGA logo for your own club logo, and again, anything that we can make it more efficient for you to do things and make it easier, all the better. So thanks, Sean, that's good.
Carrie, the other thing they usually require is a set of minutes from the meeting where those decisions were made that these people were the signatories.
Okay.
I know I've dealt with as treasurer, that's what we need to do to get the process rolling, is the minute saying that, in addition to the letter saying these people are the signatories, the minute saying that they were elected to the positions, and then we agreed that they were to become the signatories on the bank account.
Yeah, good point, Kim. We actually have a drafted resolution for that as well, so we can share the drafted resolution for the banking. And included in that resolution is typically that the committee has decided that we don't require an auditor on an annual basis as well, and that should be signed off as well, because we don't require auditors.
Yep. Okay, good. Yeah, that's great additions.
Yeah, while we're on this, Carrie, we had another question that came up. And just wondering what software other clubs are using. Kingston just started out, so any advice can be helpful. Yeah,
I would say 90% of the clubs are using like an Excel spreadsheet for their financial statements. What we did, and even their banking, sort of accounting kind of package. Wave Apps is another one. I know the Eastern Division is using that, and it's a free package that you can use. So it's just in the cloud, which is good. There's also QuickBooks, but it would end up costing about $400 a year. I had looked into there's an association called TechSoup.ca that provides discounted software for nonprofits, but the only QuickBooks they provide is a single user license that can go only on a Microsoft PC. And I have a Mac, and what I like so we ended up going with QuickBooks for the cloud, and what I like about it is that I can use it on any device, and others can get into it with password protected. What we did do, and I don't know, Arden, if you were on our webinar in October, but we did create a financial statement, which you could use, and it's a template, an Excel template, and it has all these calculations built into it. So we'll send that out if you don't already have it, and you could just start using that as well.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else use anything else other than what I just mentioned? Okay. Okay. All right. So just a little bit about for financial controls handling cash. I mean, generally, we don't. This is a really big section in sort of the sessions in Ireland because they've got gate receipts. We generally don't have that. Where we have cash, what might be at fundraiser events, or $10 to get in the door or something like that. So there are times when as clubs we handle cash. Sometimes if we're, I know where our own club will sell popsicles at a tournament or something like that for the kids to raise money, so we have a float. So it's just making sure when it comes to cash, nobody is counting cash or preparing the deposit alone. So having someone there to double sign it, maybe a piece of paper that you both sign to say, okay, there was $236 here, and John is going to go deposit it. And so again, just have it in writing. If you need to, take a photo of that little piece of paper and email it out. So just make sure you're not the only one with that information. Just make it a standard to say, does anybody else know this? If not, I need to take a photo of it and email it out to a couple people on the committee, the chair and the secretary, or something like that. So just make sure petty cash is controlled and the floats are kept safe. So again, if you've got a tournament day and you've got a canteen set up or something, as the treasurer, you might provide $500 in a float. Just make sure that you're getting that back and calculating out what the profit was and sharing that right away with other people, and then showing at the next executive meeting that here was the $500 float and here was the $236 we made on the concession, and you see that deposited on your bank statement. Where possible, avoid cash payments, even if it's small amounts. And don't sort of do a net amount. Like, try not to take it out of, say, the petty cash or the $236 profit and pay out of that. Really try and have a paper trail on everything. So use a check or an email transfer, using the procedures already mentioned. And avoid receiving cash as well. So where possible, kind of get a check or an e-transfer or even a PayPal payment. So again, you just want to make sure as much as possible you've got sort of a paper trail or an electronic trail of all transactions. Any other scenarios with cash people have or wanted to mention? Okay, so when it comes to purchasing and expenditures, so there's a couple of slides on this that just a few details that a lot of this you may already know, but some of it is pretty specific where it might be new to you. So all expenditures must be supported by appropriate documentation. So that includes an invoice, but also receipts as well. And just specifically on invoices, an invoice that you're going to pay out against, it needs to be a final invoice, not a pro forma invoice. So sometimes you may see, and you'll see this often, I see it with O'Neill's, and this is, I think, more common in Europe, but they'll send you what's called a pro forma invoice, which is sort of like, here you go, here's how much it's going to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're making the purchase. It's just it's kind of like an estimate. We would, an estimate or a pro forma invoice. So if you're paying out, from your club for against an invoice, make sure it's the final invoice. And the other small distinction is make sure it's not a statement of account. A statement of account is not an invoice. So a statement of account would be a supplier, maybe you've purchased 2 or 3 things from them, and they'll give you a summary of every purchase you've made with the invoice number. So do not accept a statement in place of an invoice when you're paying something. The other scenario is make sure you ask for proof of payment in addition to the receipt. So where this comes in quite often and happens within our own club as well is, say a club member has paid for something themselves. And so, sometimes overseas suppliers, somebody will pay with their own PayPal account, or something locally, they'll pay themselves and they bring you a receipt. Also ask them for a proof of payment, because it's one thing to get the receipt, but do we know, you just want to verify that they actually did make that payment. So ask for a copy, if they paid by email transfer or a credit card statement, a wire transfer, or a PayPal receipt. So just making sure that you've got all the documentation to be, 100% sure that the expenditure, was actually paid and the exact amount. So another thing you can do, and I recommend, is to create and use an expense form. A few slides down, I'll show you a couple of options for creating an expense form. And so you could do just a paper copy, like sort of on an Excel spreadsheet, or you can do an online form. And I'll show you some examples of that. And try to, really we recommend storing your expense forms, like the completed expense forms and the expenditure backup. So the receipts, the invoices that you paid against, try and save them centrally. So, through the chair and secretary would be able to have an MS SharePoint folder. And if we hopefully get treasurer accounts for everybody, then you'll have access to SharePoint as well. And so you can just create, here's like 2020 receipts, maybe by month, depending on how many you want. But then they're always there because, as you know, email is like a black hole. And we rely on it and we do it, but it really is easier if you can get them all saved centrally and more than one person can access them. They're not lost in somebody's personal email. And you can always access recent and past expenditures and any backup documentation for them. And whenever possible, pay suppliers directly. So again, I mean, we acknowledge that yes, and I've done it myself and others have too, is paid for things ourselves and then get reimbursed. But if you can, whenever possible, please try and have the club pay it, because again, it's just got that better paper trail where you've got, a check from your club going to this supplier for that expense. Anything else on expenditures? Anything other approaches people are using that you'd like to add to? Okay. So I talked a bit about creating a financial management policy. So these are some guidelines of, as a treasurer, you should have a written financial management policy. So it should be drafted by the treasurer, review it with the core executive committee, present it at your first executive meeting of the year, and get a vote that it be accepted. And you need to record the acceptance of the financial management policy in the meeting minutes. So some of you may have already done this, some of you may never have done this. It's something to work towards, maybe in your next meeting or the one after. I am going to provide a financial management procedure manual that you'll be able to pull from. And really, a lot of the points on these slides, it's as easy as copy and pasting them into a Word document, 2 or 3 page thing, and you get agreement from everybody of this is what our policies and procedures are. This is how we're going to, manage approvals. This is, and then it's just agreed upon, and there's never an issue. So then later on, if somebody says, oh, well, I just spent $200 on this, and you go, well, who approved it? And if it's not approved, then it won't be paid out. So so then once you have that financial policy, you have to review it, adopt it, and record it in the meetings every year thereafter at your first executive meeting. So once, the heavy lifting is getting the first one done, and then you might tweak it year after year. But even if you don't make any changes, just make sure in your first meeting that you've presented it, everyone's agreed to it, because you're going to have, often have new people, and make sure it's recorded in the minutes. So when it comes to the policy, there's a couple of sections I just wanted to highlight to make sure that you have and that are mandatory financial procedures. So an expenditure approval process. So just agree on the pre-approval process. So it might be that, you at a certain amount, like over $50 or over $100, it needs, the chairperson and secretary to approve it. If it's over, $200, you need the full committee to approve it. So in this manual we'll share with you, we have kind of a matrix, and you can decide if that suits you and you agree to it, or if you want to change it for your club, that's fine. But just make sure that the pre-approval process is agreed upon, and the amounts, the approval amounts. So like I was saying, which who needs to approve what amount, and even things, get down to the details in terms of sort of travel expenses, like what's going to be covered, what are the dollar limits on a flight or a hotel or gas, or, for gas, it's like, well, we'll just cover, if it's $50 to go, down to Montreal or to Toronto, $50 in gas, you're covering that, not necessarily like how many kilometers it is. I mean, that's more typical for like large corporations. I mean, we're a nonprofit sports association. So typically it's like if it costs you $25 for gas and you had 3 people in your car, well, then it's the $25 that gets reimbursed. So just agree on what that is and really line that out in your document. And then the expense claim process. So, agree on how you're going to accept the expenses to be submitted, and the approvals in advance. So this is just a couple of examples of expense claim forms. So this I created for Canada GAA. It's just an Excel spreadsheet, and I just built in like a drop-down menu, so you could kind of, so when somebody has so if they come back like, from an event, or they've got 3 or 4 things that they purchased that they need reimbursement for, they can use this form. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. It's got built-in formulas. We can share a copy of this, and you could adapt it. So you could customize the colors, the title, the expense categories, things like that. Another option is to create an online claim form. So this is one that we created for our club, and it's basically just an online form of what I just showed you. So we happen on our website, we use what's called JotForm. It's just a free forms plugin, and just you name, phone number, email, what the expense is for, how much, and then you also have the ability to upload the receipt. So you can see on the second screen there, there's if you had 3 or 4 different receipts or invoices, you can upload those. And what's nice is all the documentation gets saved centrally, so you can go back, you can download an Excel spreadsheet that summarizes everything, and you can always access the receipts and invoices. So it's just really handy. So you should be able to also create something similar in MS Forms, which the chair and secretary of each club would have access to do. So you could create that form, and then that just goes out. Everybody knows, here's the link. If you have an expense submission, fill it out online, take a picture of your receipt and upload it. Any questions on that? Okay. So just a couple more things in terms of sort of financial controls in terms of grants and assets. So generally, just make sure that you're complying with all the terms and conditions of a grant. So including whatever financial requirements they have, or they might be imposed by a funder or by a partner that you work with. So as an example, some clubs have had DFA grants, and so those require clawback. If you haven't spent the funds, then the funds need to be returned. And then just ensuring that the reports are accurate in terms of, this is how much you spent. We said we were going to spend it on this, and we spent it on this much, and we had $100 left, and so you just net it out. And just making sure that you spend only on what has been approved in the grant. Any deviations you would have to get approval for. So that's it on grants. And then just a general point about protection of assets. I mean, obviously you're going to be sort of the biggest protector of the cash assets, but think about your other inventory of assets, which is your equipment, and just or promotional banners and things like that, training equipment, and consider assigning an equipment manager. And so your coaches would be signing in and out equipment, and keep a shared spreadsheet online, like maybe a Google Doc of sort of where the equipment is, because we know equipment is very expensive, and it can easily just be sitting in someone's basement or somebody's trunk of their car and not even realize it. So it's just really important to do this. I know, Jake, in Montreal, you guys have an equipment manager. I assume that works well for you.
Yeah, it's still tricky just because they can't always be there, but yeah, we do.
And do you use like an online shared spreadsheet or something for the kind of keeping an inventory of everything?
We do an inventory at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good. All right, so that's I think everything I've covered there. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so I mentioned earlier a financial procedures policy. So when I was on the one of the GAA or Ulster GAA Treasurer webinars, they mentioned a financial procedures manual, the Ulster GAA one. So what we've done is we've taken that and adapted it. There wasn't too much to change. I mean, again, they do mention a lot more the gate receipts and cash that we don't really have in Lotto and things like that, which we don't generally have. So I've tried to adapt as much as possible. So this is something that we'll share with you in a Word document format. And so if you want to adapt it, replace the logo with your club logo, keep in what makes sense, adapt, change, whatever. It's just, at least it's a document to start with. And you might, you could pull in things from these slides if you want, and it should get you 80 or 90% there in sort of creating a financial procedures policy for your own club, and just a little bit of tweaking, and then hopefully at your next meeting, if you haven't already, be able to present something like this. Okay, so that's it in terms of sort of financial procedures and controls. Any questions or comments on that? If you're new to it, it probably sounds like a lot. It, you know, we have it all written down, and it's, you know, it's just something that's kind of essential to ensuring it's all sort of properly managed. But you'll get through it. Okay. Okay, so just a little bit about sort of the monthly requirements. So on a monthly basis, just making sure as treasurer you're you know, recording the payments, you're looking at income and expenditure analysis, and doing a bank reconciliation. So each month, just review the bank account against, you know, making sure, just kind of check off that you're, you know, all of the income and expenses. And then at your monthly meeting is report that bank reconciliation and make sure that it's signed and countersigned. So you would sign it to say, yes, this is the report for this month, and get it countersigned by the chair or secretary, and then ensure that it's recorded in the minutes. And so then it's saying, okay, yes, here we are. We've got, you know, this much coming in this month. We've got 2 checks outstanding that are still to be cashed, and here's our cash position. So it can be a short report, but just make sure that it's included in the minutes. Another good practice is, I think I mentioned this actually, is to send a copy of the bank statement to the chair and secretary and one other person who's not an account signatory. So do that each month. And yeah, just ensure that the financial report each month is reviewed and accepted and recorded. And these are just, I won't go through these. They're just sort of some basic, just kind of good notes to have if you're, you know, speaking, and even as you're kind of working on educating your other committee members on sort of, you know, what you do, what you're responsible for, and why it's so important. These would be some good speaking points that you could refer to. Kind of the reasons why to, you know, manage it monthly. Okay, so that's everything there. Okay, so just a little bit on budgeting. Again, just kind of couple key points in terms of sort of, you know, what budgeting does for you is it really forces your organization to prioritize your activities and really determine what's most critical for fulfilling your mission. It helps you with short-term and long-term strategic goals. It keeps the executive committee focused, and it's something that can keep your members informed. So just a couple of, again, key points in terms of sort of why to create a budget. I won't go through it, but it really, you know, it really helps keep focus, I think, is the key thing, and accountability. So as part of the template that I mentioned to Arden that we created for the financial statements, on the 4th page or tab, we included a one tab that is for budgeting. And so what's good about it is it's tied to, so if you've used this to enter in your 2 previous years worth of data, it'll carry this through, so you'll be able to compare. And, you know, really, so if you know that you spent, you know, $2,000 on equipment the year before, but you're adding a new code, or you're, you know, you don't need to buy, you know, you'll just be able to see the side-by-side data. So this tab is just for internal uses. It's not one that you need to submit with your financial statements by any means, but it's there and could help with budgeting. It's kind of got the main categories that all of us need. So that's there.
I think, Kerry, you might want to mention the reason why we created this template.
Oh, yeah. So basically, you know, we had seen GAA and Ulster and Camogie had created templates for clubs to use, because we were all receiving all sorts of different formats of financial statements, some more sophisticated than others. I mean, we do have 1 or 2 clubs that have QuickBooks, and they, you know, do full-blown, you know, financial statements on QuickBooks, and some where one I recall, we got on a Word document, which, as you know, doesn't have an adding feature even. So it was really all over the map. So we created this template to really assist clubs, you know, that kind of, it's there. All the categories are pre-populated. There's built-in formulas that carry over to your balance sheet. You know, you put in your opening balance of your bank account, it'll carry over again onto your balance sheet. So it was really just, you know, to help clubs sort of efficiently really up the, you know, professional level of their reporting. And that it meant too, then as a county, when we get the financial statements, we're able to look at information consistently across the board. I included this slide just as a summary of when you are doing your budgeting, just some dates and amounts to keep in mind. And I based it just on, because I'm not I don't know. I know I'm more familiar with the Eastern divisional fees, so I've just based it on that. But so where the divisional fees are, they're going to be different between the West, Toronto, and the East. But some of these fees are standard, so I just wanted to include them so then you have in mind, because it gets a bit confusing. You're like, well, wait a minute, the county, we got billed for this in April and we got billed for this in October. So I really just wanted to lay it out so we all know what all the fees are made up of in terms of each year. So annually, there's Canada GAA charges an affiliation fee of $200. So that's generally payable at the end of April to Canada GAA. So that goes towards our operational budget and all the things that we do on behalf of the clubs. So then we have our insurance. Now it's made up of a commercial liability policy and a sports accident policy. They're combined. And what happens is we get billed for that policy. It renews November 26th. So we pay that policy in December. Then in this sort of Q1, we go out to the clubs to say, okay, well, how many codes is your club, having this year? We get that information in, and then basically we just prorate the amount of the total policy and split it across all the clubs in Canada. So this example I included is just if you had 2 codes. So based on last year, it was $195 per code. If you had men's football and ladies football, your insurance cost would be $390. So I just wanted to include an example so you have a sense. And just to note too that, so we did just renew the policy there at the end of November, and insurance rates have gone up, unfortunately. So we are looking at a policy increase. So this amount will change a little bit, but it is sort of split across all the clubs across the country. And so it does change a little bit from year to year. And we have that due same time as the affiliation fee, which is the 30th of April. But we carry that. So we pay it, and say 4 or 5 months later, collect it from the clubs, and then we go back in that cycle again each year. So divisional affiliation fees. So in the East, as an example, they charge $100 plus the next one would be entry into the Eastern Championships, and that's $250 per team. So I just kind of picked those numbers as an example for the East. I know in the West, Kim, you guys combine that. So you come a fee, and again, it's kind of prorated across the clubs. In Toronto, the fees are even higher because they have a regular league that runs from May, May through to September. And so their divisional fees are higher for that reason. So those are generally, I don't actually know when Toronto pays their divisional fees, but I should confirm that. I don't know, Sean, if you know, but anyway, it's spring.
I think we'll also mention there, Kerry, that we have a third policy now, the abuse and molestation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in our general liability policy, there was an exclusion for abuse policy. So we have it's really important, that we have that, and so we've added that as a third policy, and so that to make sure that we're covered in that in the event of anything like that happening, and so that'll be added as well.
I think the other point that's worth mentioning is the divisional fees should be already set out in divisional regulations.
Right. Yeah, so those get set out and reviewed and approved by the county early in the year. Then clubs are informed, and from there, and then those are payable to the division. So, and usually kind of happens springtime. So I kind of just picked June, but it's around that. But again, I just kind of wanted to give you a sense of there's kind of three times in the year where there's different fees that clubs will have to pay. So the third set of fees is from our governing bodies. And so they're broken out GAA, LGFA, and Camogie. And so those are generally around October timeframe. And one of the reasons it follows that is because for the GAA, for example, the fees there are based on the number of players you've had in that season. So it's $5 per player. So I just used an example. Say you had 50 players, you'd pay $250. In previous years, we had the clubs paying the divisions for these player registration fees that go to our governing bodies. But going forward, what we just thought, Canada GAA will do the invoicing to the clubs, to kind of just take that administrative burden off the divisions, because we just remit that. It comes into us, and we remit that right out back to Croke Park. And so $5 per player for GAA fees. For LGFA, it's $75 per team. So if your club has ladies football, it's $75. And for Camogie, they charge a flat fee of $450 for Canada, and we split that amongst the clubs that have Camogie as a code, and that would get split out. So then we'll work all that out for each club and send an invoice out in sort of the September-October timeframe, and then we just collect that all in and then remit that to GAA. So in any case, you're probably looking at a minimum of sort of, $1,600 or so, depending on how many codes, but maybe a little less if you got less players. But just in terms of budgeting, I wanted to outline those things, and so you'll know when to expect those expenses to come through. Is there any questions on that? Okay, yeah, so just an example of costs. Just a couple of other key dates. I covered a couple of these on April 30th. That's insurance and affiliation fees. Another key date for you as treasurers is your year-end. Financial year-end is October 31st. And so your AGM must be completed by then. And then 4 weeks after your AGM, your financial statements, a copy of your bank statement, and your AGM minutes need to be sent to the county board. So obviously it's your secretary that'll work on the minutes, but the first two is something you would work on as the treasurer. Okay, so just I'll finish up here. We're a little past 2 o'clock, but we've got a little bit of a late start, and then I want to open up for questions and discussion. A few closing thoughts in terms of finances and financial management. Units, and that, by that I mean club, division, county, we need to be transparent in all of our finances. Any club member or other stakeholder should be able to see them upon request. So at any time, the county could request to see your financial statements or your bank statement, or we could have Croke Park requesting to see ours. And so we have to be open and ready for that. And that should be no problem because we're transparent about all of our financials. And maintaining transparency is good for the overall well-being of a club or division or the county. And one thing too that we've talked about it as a county is really be prepared to answer financial questions at a club AGM and encourage them. I mean, it really is, the financials are here, we're open, and you want people, what we've found is, we don't often hear people asking a lot of questions about the financials. So we really encourage people to, encourage your members to ask questions. And also we encourage you, ask questions at the divisional AGM. If you don't know what something is, or you want to know more about it, and you want the details, the backup, about it, ask those questions. And same at the county AGM, definitely, or if you think of something after, ask the question after, we're happy to answer it. But just really want to, we want to encourage people to ask questions, and we want to be asking questions ourselves. Again, to sort of, keep the transparency and ensure that it's all above board, and everybody, you shouldn't ever feel, gee, why did that person ask that question? It should be like, oh, sure, here you go, and here's the answer. So I just wanted to cover kind of next steps coming out of this, and kind of some of these you may have already done, but at least this gives you sort of a game plan coming out of this session of what you can work on. So first, review your financial management procedures against the guidelines provided in this session today, and then adjust accordingly. Some of this you might already be doing most of it, and you just have to tweak a little bit, or some of this, a lot of it could be new, and it'll help kind of jumpstart you and get you up to a really good operating level. Create a financial management policy for your club, review and approve at the next committee meeting, and record that approval in the meetings. So if you don't already have one, you'll have a lot of tools here to be able to hopefully create one. And, it's like anything. It's like launching any software. As soon as you launch it, it's outdated and you have to update it. But don't wait to do it. So even if you don't get it 100% on your first go, at least get the, the basis, even if you get a 1-pager approved. So you have some basics, and then maybe the next meeting you add to it. But just, don't be afraid to get something going and get some sort of policy in writing. It will really help you, and it'll help you avoid issues. That's the biggest thing. And it protects you, protects your club, protects the association. And then just report. So make sure you're reporting at your monthly meetings. So I went over kind of some of the basics that you need to do, your financial report, the bank statement, that type of thing, and make sure it gets recorded in the minutes. And if you haven't already, look at developing an annual budget. So you've got a spreadsheet there that should be able to help you with that. Ask for input from all of the different areas, from your development people, your coach people, whoever within your club. What have they spent? Look at what you've spent in the last few years. Look at your plans for the future. Estimate accordingly, and then just present that at your next committee meeting for review and discussion. So I think we'll end there. I mean, I really didn't anticipate having time for the financial reporting, the annual financial reporting. So I think we'll end there, and we can look at something in the fall for the annual financial statement. So I'd like to open it up for discussion or comments. Anything else that we missed that we should consider, anything you're doing that you want to suggest to others. We have, clubs like Kingston that are brand new, and Van Isle Rovers, and clubs like Montreal that are 75 years old on this call. So we have a real breadth of experience on the call.
Hi, Carrie. I have a suggestion as someone who's been a divisional and club treasurer for many years, is do the monthly reports, like even though there might be 3 transactions, get them done, because it keeps you from getting overwhelmed, trying to do them all at once if your club isn't on top of things and doesn't need the monthly reports. And it also creates a better practice of people being open about the reports if they get them every month.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Those same reports should be passed on to the county from the divisions. And the reason being that the divisions are subcommittees of the county, so it gives the county an idea throughout the year as well of what's happening at divisional level, at subcommittee level.
Anybody else want to comment or talk about, if you had any challenges or anything else, any help or support, that you would like to see from the county or from in this area? Okay. Well, I guess if no one has any questions or any topics they want to discuss, I guess we'll wrap it up. 2:08. That's not too bad. Kind of within the hour. We're always here to answer questions. So feel free to drop a line. My email address is treasurer.ca@ga.ie. So anything treasure related. Kim has a ton of experience as well. She's pro.ca@ga.ie. So feel free to ask her or, look for feedback. And, there's, like I said, there's a lot of varying degrees of experience, some new to treasurer role, some very experienced. So I know, clubs are always really helpful and, open to questions like, I'll often, ask other, Jake, I'll send Jake a note like, oh, okay, what about this? What do you guys do here in Montreal when I'm looking at something for our club, right? And so we're all, I always look at it as rising water floats all boats. So the better that any one club does, the better that all of us do. And so anything we can do to help support that and support each other, we certainly encourage. So Sean, if you want to just sort of close us off, if there's no other questions.
Yeah, just wrapping it up. And I think, when we have sessions like this here, there are typically questions that emanate from taking this away and taking a hard look at it when you have the opportunity to sit down. So as Kerry has mentioned there, just remember that, we do have an open door policy. Please feel free to reach out to us. There are no bad questions. It's far better to ask a question than to move ahead and do something that becomes questionable later on. And I think if we all stick to the protocols as outlined today, we'll never get ourselves in any issues or any trouble. So other than that, just to say thanks to everybody again for joining us, but a huge thanks as well to Kerry for putting this incredible presentation together. Kerry, well done as usual. It's been great. So thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to wrap it up with that. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Carrie. Great presentation.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks.
Okay. Bye, guys.